think I've just pressed record.
Cool. Okay, so yeah, this is sort of a talk / workshop on how I hacked my smart doorbell to do facial recognition this summer, and kind of the challenges that I faced, and a bit of a deep dive into the code and the different integrations that I used to get it all working. So here my name's Dan Beglin. I'm currently a senior integration engineer at Griffiths Waite. GW do digital design, API platforms, do smart AI applications, and we focus on sort of accelerated delivery for those projects. The reason I'm including that is that essentially I'm a glorified plumber at work. So we do all these sort of really incredible digital projects for big clients, and we have a great team of people that do really nice looking, really clever sort of front end systems for clients that have got massive databases, massive systems, products they bought 10, 15, 20 years ago. And my job is essentially to plug everything together in the back end of that, which made it really easy to do the smart home stuff, because it's the exact same problem. I spend all day plugging in systems at work, and then I come home and I sort of convince myself it isn't really work, even though it is. So that's who I am and what I do. The plan for today is to kind of break down the project that I've done in terms of the facial recognition. As for the workshop code, there's a few prerequisites to get this running. So one of them is you need a Ring doorbell, and you also need an Azure account. So doing a kind of a step-by-step walkthrough wasn't really going to work, because everyone would have to set up, put your credit card into Azure and stuff ahead of time. So what I did was I took the integration, this bit of the smart home, and I've made a brand new repository, which is the link which Ellie shared in the chat. The idea is that there's two branches. There's a workshop start and a workshop complete. If you want to sort of sit and have a hack as I go through it and kind of get a feel for how the solution works, then feel free. If you want to kind of just wait till the end and do something really cool afterwards with it, the idea is that I've given you all the code and the building blocks to take this forward and build whatever you want with it. I'm kind of excited to see. This is really early days for what I've done with this, so I'm sure people will go and do even cooler things than sort of the initial hack I've done. So in terms of the agenda, what the plan is, I'll go through a bit more about the smart home and how it works, so you get a feel for where this sits in the overall solution. And I'll do a bit more explanation of how the actual end-to-end of the smart doorbell works. And then I'll break down the kind of the hack that I've used to get all the data off the Ring doorbells, and I'll do a deep dive on that code. Then I'll do the same again for the Azure Faces API, which is kind of the engine AI that I'm using to do the facial recognition. And then I'll do a deep dive on that, and then sort of discuss a few of the kind of the ethical issues that I faced. And what I mean by ethical issues are, I went and built this stuff, and then my wife was like, what about X? And that's how I've kind of listed the ethical issues. And I'm really interested to get people's views on that, because I'm kind of just reasonably new into doing AI. So I know that you guys have done a lot of work on ethics. I know we had a whole talk 2 months ago on the ethics of stuff. So I'm really interested to get people's views on how this works at the end. So Karen is my smart home system. That is purely a SpongeBob reference. I needed a name, and the Karen, the computer wife of Plankton, seemed like a really good fit. So the smart home system is essentially, it's kind of 3 or 4 components. The first is it's an API platform. So being an API engineer, going back 10 years ago now, before I did my degree, I did a sort of a short work program with a guy that I know, just kind of basically being this guy's PA. And he was a property developer, really into smart home stuff. So one of the projects I did was trying to build a smart doorbell. And we got reasonably far into that until we got the news that a company called Ring had just secured millions of pounds worth of funding, and they were going to be the new big doorbell. So it kind of stings a little bit that I'm talking about their platform tonight. If things had gone differently. But that really got me interested in IoT and smart home stuff. I then went on to do my degree, where I kind of focused a bit more on APIs, back-end engineering. And so this has always been a platform for me to learn new skills. So originally I built something in Python that was really bad, and then I learned JavaScript and Node.js, and then I sort of learned how to build APIs. So that's kind of how I built this API platform, which I'm going to give you a very quick demo of. So the core of the system is this big API that I've built, which connects to all the different products in my house and a few other things. So I can get all the data on the smart lights and do the, in fact, if I, 3 is the office. So if I tell it to dim the office lights, my house light dims. Essentially, this is a really good solution because it means that neither me or my wife need to go to bed to turn the lights off at night. And that's like the big win in terms of getting to adopt the whole smart home stuff was you won't have to get out of bed anymore to turn the light off, because that was one of the big arguments we'd have when we were first married of, no, it's your turn or you were in bed last. So that's helped with the adoption side of things. And one of the products which I've integrated in is some smart doorbells. So when we bought this house a couple of years ago, we bought 2 Ring doorbells, one for the front, one for the back. And that gave me sort of a platform to kind of have a go with. So that's all currently plugged into the solution. So at the moment, it just grabs some data and I play around with it. So yeah, so the kind of the central thing is the API platform. I've also been working on a chatbot. That's, a couple of years ago, GW started to pivot towards doing chatbots. It was like, well, I want to know how to do chatbots. I want to be involved in this. So I went and taught myself. I think I did it over Christmas. I built a chatbot that, it was really simple using AWS Lambda, connected it to Facebook. So one of the more recent things I've built is, if I message on Facebook to Karen, Karen, can you put a film on TV? She'll dim the lights in the living room. She'll open up Netflix on the smart TV, which is something that I've integrated in. So, kind of a proper personal assistant type thing. Unfortunately, I forgot to pay my AWS bills this month, and they turned off a database in the cloud that I was using. So the chatbot's currently down, sadly. But I've got a print screen, and I'll show you some other bits later about it. And I'm also trying to build a web and a mobile app so that we can control the smart house without having to use the chatbot. As you can tell, I'm a back-end engineer. I have 0 skills in design at the moment, and it's a big challenge for me. But at some point, there'll be a front end, and I've sort of kept a log of how I'm doing with learning that and sort of designing it on Instagram. So in terms of this bit, one of the things I built most recently for the smart home was I'd realized that I plugged in my doorbell and I was getting some data. The idea was that I could get a picture. I think actually, at the moment, if I'd got it so I could get a snapshot outside. So I could just take a picture, essentially it was CCTV that I'd really integrate it for. It takes a little bit of time because it's saving an image. There you go. So that's currently outside my house. The idea being that this would just be a widget on whatever front end, or I could ask Carrie, what's going on outside, and I'd just be able to sort of treat it as a bit of a CCTV system. So that was kind of how I plugged in the doorbell initially, and I picked up the Azure AI exam resources. So I was asked to sort of go go and take that exam for work. And I've done the chatbot stuff, I've done the machine learning, and one of the topics was facial recognition and the Azure offerings for that. And I didn't know anything about facial recognition at the time. So I thought, well, all right, let's think of a project that I can do. And so I sort of looked at the doorbell, thought, this could work. So essentially this whole piece was just revision for me to kind of have a hack around with what they offer, understand it a bit more, and learn a bit more about AI. So in terms of what's currently in the workshop and what is plugged into the house, the idea is that you press the Ring doorbell. So there's an event listener that kicks off an event which the core that API server is listening for. What that does is it tells the doorbell, get me a picture, take a picture now and save it to the box. That will then send the image to Azure. Azure provides something called the Azure Faces API, which essentially is kind of a collection of different facial recognition offerings. So one of them that we're going to do a quick look at is where you can see, it will tell you, look, you sent it a picture and it will give you all the information you could possibly ask about someone's face, like age and emotion, things like that. And the other thing it can do is you can train a model to look at someone's face and give it, say, 10, 20 photos. It will then build up a recognition model. So then when you fire a brand new photo at that, it will say, oh, I recognize that person's in there. So that was what I plugged in essentially. I built a person group, filled it with 5 of my friends' Facebook photos. I did ask their permission, and then I went trawling through all of their Facebook photos to try and get a decent collection. So a little bit creepy, but they all expressly gave me their permission, I like to assure you. And then because I'd already plugged in the chatbot to Facebook Messenger, I had it so when it recognizes someone, it will say, oh, there's someone at the door. I don't, if it's just movement, it will say, oh, I don't think it's a person. Or it will say, oh, it's a person, but I don't recognize them. So, it's probably my postman. Or it will say, for example, Connor Fitzgerald's at the door. Some that it recognizes, they're at the door. It sort of was just a nice little feature to add to it that I found really interesting. So that's kind of the boundaries for tonight's talk. And that's also the boundaries for the workshop. So the code, the workshop code that I put up kind of tells you what you need, and it will essentially, hopefully, give you the end-to-end solution on this branch. So if you want to kind of hack around with it and add something else, this should reflect what I've got locally. And the README kind of just gives you a chance to sort of, what you need and some of the documentation which I provided, things that I used to build this. So it's not okay, you can have a go now or you can do afterwards, it's perfectly fine either way. There's a lot of prerequisites to get going. So in terms of the actual code is, well, how does all of this work? So the best place to start is here at the doorbell, in terms of how I've plugged into Karen. Into the Ring doorbells from Karen. So if we go to the index, can everyone see the text clearly on my screen?
Yeah, it's all good on our end.
Perfect. So it's really simple. Ring provides an event listener, which is kind of a JavaScript concept. It's basically pub sub model. So it will publish an event and you can set up listeners that kind of, oh, that's a ding, and it will run a piece of code. So that's all that the workshop code is. This in the actual system, this is sort of one of 6 or 7 things that were running listening for different things, but I've just extracted this out for this project. And essentially the key thing it does at the start is it logs into the Ring APIs. So Ring don't provide any sort of integrations for developers. This is kind of one of the big challenges with building smart home stuff yourself is some products, for example, the smart lights that Philips Hue provide, they give a brilliant API for developers. It's really well documented. When they change things, they tell you in advance. It's a joy to work with. It's really, really nice. And then you've got the other end of the scale where there are products where they just don't have any sort of API at all. The only thing you can do is talk to Alexa or Google Home and stuff, which has led to this sort of middle ground of big open source projects to essentially hack their API, and essentially it's a mimic attack officially. I hate using that word because I don't want to get told off by Amazon, but essentially Ring have an app that you can log into your account with. Ring have an app which you can log into your account with, and people have built APIs now and sort of bits of code that can mimic that. So this code was written by a guy called Dusty, who I think works for GitHub now. So he is a genuine genius, and he every day just seems to keep on top of whenever Ring change something. He sort of reverse engineers it and then uploads it and maintains this. And that's a lot of this smart home ecosystem is like this, where it's basically people building their own APIs in their free time to connect to these products because they like the product, and then they're showing that they're releasing it for everyone. So out of the smart home stuff that I've got, the lights are, I think, the only thing with a proper API that's for developers. The TV, the smart radiators, the doorbells, they're all kind of these type of open source projects where someone has reverse engineered a part of this system and has sort of made it available for other people to use. So this code is this is one of the best maintained things I've seen for this type of smart home thing. Dusty is really, really good. I think partly because he's got sponsors as well, and that's kind of a whole part of the open source ecosystem at the moment, is that very recently you can now kind of sponsor people when you like their project. There's always been a donate button, but now it's kind of been plugged into GitHub a lot better. So it's not just sort of buying someone a coffee. You can say, actually, I really love this thing. I'm going to give you £2 a month or something to say thank you. So this is a very simple NPM module, which is a reusable component in Node.js, which is essentially the runtime for JavaScript or TypeScript. And it just essentially, it abstracts away all of the underlying complexity plugging into Ring doorbells. So you call it, you set up your own API, you sort of get an instance of the API, and you pass it in your login token. So as far as this code is concerned, it thinks I'm the mobile app. That's the hack. Everything it provides me is what it provides the app on my phone. All the data, because I've authenticated. The authentication is a bit of a challenge because every time you call it, or every couple of minutes, it refreshes that authentication key between my phone and the doorbell to stop things like this happening. So there's a bit of code in the workshop repo, which is for authentication, which essentially every time it finds out that Ring have changed the authentication key, it will just replace it. It will get that key and it will put it in your .m file. A .m file is essentially just environment variables, so it just sits underneath everything on your system. It's the best way to sort of store keys I've found at the moment. I'm really terrified I'm going to open any of my .m files and leak all of my keys for everything. So I'm going to step away from that area. But essentially, it just listens on an event loop, the same as the door pressed loop, and says, "Oh yeah, something's updated. Let's update that." So the next time you send a request from this system, Amazon Ring still think that you're the person, you're the app. In terms of the listener, essentially it's a really simple bit of code. I log in, I get essentially a session open with Ring. And then so this is where I subscribe here on line 32. So this is the bit which listens for anything on the refresh token side. So if ever that changes, it will update. And then I actually get to the interesting bit here. So I go and grab all of the cameras at startup. So we've got 2 doorbell cameras. So I'll get a list of 2, essentially, in fact. Yeah, so you can see the data that I get back initially on the doorbell. So my front door, it's at 39% battery. It's on volume 8. Got good signal. And then this is essentially the back end representation of what the app would show you. And then I've got my back door as well. So what I do is I listen for an event called on doorbell pressed. And that really is the signal, right? Someone's pressed my doorbell, do something. And that's the listener that I hold for. And what I do is I get a snapshot from Ring. So, that bit, this was pre-built. This was kind of almost my CCTV component. It takes a picture. And the code for that is all in here. So essentially, gets camera, blah, 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 throws an error if it doesn't. Gets an image, turns it into buffer, and then saves it to my machine and writes it to that file. So when someone presses the doorbell, the first step is takes a picture of them and saves it on my machine. If you're playing ethical bingo, that's probably one of them you need to sort of tick off. And then the next step is to call Azure and try and identify some faces, which we'll go back to in a second. If Azure says there are no faces or it can't recognize it, it will send me this message. In the actual implementation, this sends it to Facebook. For this, I've just logged it to the console because connecting to Facebook is a real pain. A warning which I would give anyone if they're planning to have a go at this is I sort of built all this. I got 5 of my friends to give me all their photos. And a friend of mine called Amy came around a couple of days after I built it. I said, we're going to try the doorbell. We're going to try the doorbell. Okay. So I made us stand out in the rain and press the doorbell. And there was a delay in the code somewhere. So I think by the time she'd come out of the rain, that was when it took a picture of it was a split second. It just missed a picture of her. So it just took a picture of my garden, essentially. Sent that to Azure. Azure, as you can imagine, didn't recognize any faces. And this was the message that popped up on my phone as I was showing her, which is there's something moving outside, but I don't think it's a person. She wasn't very happy with that. So it's kind of a lesson learned in making things user-friendly. Sort of this is the back engineer problem, which, I didn't think about at the time, but she was not particularly happy with me. If it does identify faces, it will loop through and it will say, the faces that I can see are, for example, Connor and Amy are at the door. If it's one, it will say there's someone at the door. And if it doesn't recognize them, so it will say, actually, there is a face, but I don't know who that person is. That's not in my system. It will say there's someone at the door, but I don't recognize them. And this is just some really janky logic to work out if it's plural or not. That's kind of the core listener for the doorbell, and it's really simple because all of the hard work has been done. I'm not going to try and open it, but in the Ring API module, which Dusty's provided from GitHub. So you can have a look at that. I've put a link in. He gives a really good guide on how to use it and how to just get some basic data. He also provides a really useful wiki on getting the refresh token initially. So he's provided another library, which essentially runs in your command line and you log into it. You put, username and password, and it will say, Ring is going to give you this exact token. So now you can use it and Ring will think that you're their mobile app, which was really hard before Dusty released this. This was a massive challenge, to the point that I couldn't actually get it working until Dusty released this, and I'd sort of come across it. So again, as an integration engineer, I just sort of take clever people's work and plug them together and take all the credit. So that's really the Ring doorbell side of things. Are there any sort of questions on that initially?
Any questions, anyone? There is just one comment in the chat that you might have seen.
I haven't. Let me. How do I get the chat back up?
I can read it out.
Oh, that'd be really useful.
Just on the comment from member DL. Just on the ethics front, I've worked in IT as a developer for 30 plus years, currently a BA, and work for a large UK-based software house, and I come across this sort of thing all the time. Just because we can, does it mean we should? Is the question I always ask. What worries me is that facial data bypasses GDPR and goes straight into Microsoft in this case. In the US, having worked there for over 5 years or so, they simply don't have the GDPR legislation we have here. Good question.
Yeah, it's a solid point. To be honest, I initially rushed in and sort of started playing with it, and I thought, well, as soon as it was the point where I'd logged on to Facebook, and Connor's here tonight, but I logged on to Connor's profile and I just right-clicked and saved a photo, and I thought I should check this. This is that kind of oh, hang on, I'm about to take someone's data and put it in the cloud. Which is a bit problematic, if I'm honest. One of the one of the positives of the cloud computing stuff that I've used is you can choose what location your code runs in. So is it domain on Azure? Yeah, essentially the location that my facial recognition stuff is running is in Europe. It's in the UK. So as far as I'm aware, it has to conform to GDPR. That's what it says on the box. In theory it should, but this is just a side project. It's not commercial, so there's I could have took all these photos without permission, put it onto Azure. There's currently no there's no protections Azure have provided to say have you got their permission. It's just a note in the documentation, which is potentially quite problematic. I made sure to get permission off everyone in writing. I made them send me a message on Facebook and say, yeah, I am totally happy for you to do this. And again, for the talk tonight, just in case I accidentally leaked their names, they all agreed, yeah, you can do that. Are there any other questions on that, or I'll jump to the Azure side and we'll do a bit more of a deep dive on that?
Hope that answers your comment. There is just one more comment from Daryl.
Okay.
Daryl, would you like to read it out yourself make the comment, or?
Hello, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
No, I understand completely. It's a pet project. It looks a really good project. But yes, somebody making use of it should look at their own legal situation with regard to GDPR. That's me talking as previously having a position as a compliance officer. So you do need to register, I believe, in the UK if you have a CCTV that intersects a public place as well. People think they can have them on the outside of buildings without actually registering them, but lots of people don't. But anyway, back to the technical content. That's the interesting bit rather than the legal matter.
Thank you.
On that point about so I don't catch anything. So let's get the snapshot up. Because we're quite set back in this property, you can barely see any of. I don't think you can see actually any of the street. We're moving house soon, which is kind of why half the API stuff is down, because I'm currently looking at ripping out the smart radiator bits. Our next house will just face out onto the street. It doesn't really have a front garden, so that's something that I've already started to look at. Is that right to do? And it's useful to know I'd need to register with someone. The other challenge was, looking at this is my neighbour's house up here. And the Ring doorbells do pick up a lot of their stuff, Luckily, Ring provide one of the bits in the app is that you can tailor what triggers off motion events. So at the moment, I only capture any motion in my garden. So if people are going into their house, it took a bit of tweaking, but it doesn't register anything now. It doesn't send me a notification now that there's movement. But one of the things I did when I put it up was I checked with my neighbour. And I think this is kind of one of the key sort of takeaways is that when you're doing if you're doing stuff with other people's data, even informally, I think it's a really, at least just check with them. Because actually, if my neighbours had said we're not really comfortable, I wouldn't have even bought, I'd have sent the doorbells back, sort of thing. Just notice they quite like it, because if there's any crime in the area, there's also, well, is it being picked up? But I completely agree about that. And because I was picking, I'm taking an image technically of my neighbour's front garden every time someone rings my doorbell. I kind of checked with them first before I built any of this, just because I didn't want to upset them. Are there anything else before I move on to the facial recognition bit? Cool. Okay. So I kind of very briefly skipped over it. So once I've integrated the ring, I've got the snapshot. I jumped to this identifying faces function. So this is a bit more convoluted, where I log into the Azure Face API with my credentials and do some work. So I initially, in terms of backend development, I initially was working on AWS. My last job, a company called Bluetail, were all AWS with all of their clients. So I learned all of that. And then I've transitioned to Azure recently, and I found that the quick start stuff on Azure is really, really easy and really, really powerful. So if people are interested, I was able to go from not having anything set up on Azure to kind of analyzing an example face in like half an hour. They provide all the code examples in like 3 or 4 languages. And I found the documentation on this really, really good, really, really useful and quite in depth. And not just that, because I produce a lot of API documentation for work, but a lot of APIs miss kind of like a quick start thing. It's like, well, yeah, here's everything you can ever do with it, but you probably just want to do one thing first, and here's a quick start. And Microsoft are really, really good at providing that. And so I just ran through this one evening at the start of it. It really gave me a good, essentially it's a sales thing for them. They're showing you how good it is. But I was genuinely impressed and almost a little bit terrified of how good it was. So I've lost the code for this. I was planning to show it, but I ran out of time. But I did run this on pictures of me right at the very start. And if I'm honest, it was really good at recognizing my age. I think it was within 2 or 3 years it was getting it right. With multiple different pictures of me. It hadn't been trained on my face. This wasn't like I built a model of Dan Beglin and it was analyzing it. It was just, here's a picture of a bloke. And it was saying, yeah, that bloke is in his late 20s. And even when I was trying to do, once I kind of seen this kind of, oh, okay, let's have a look at, it really was picking up my facial expressions. And that was the point where I sort of said to my friends, like, send me a picture of yourself quick. And I think we even tried it on a dog, but it didn't work. But it really is, the stuff that they offer is really, for me, not knowing anything about AI, this seemed really, really powerful. I'm sure some people have worked with some, really high-tech facial recognition stuff, but the stuff that they give you out the box for free was really almost terrifying, but really, really cool. In terms of pricing, Azure do a free tier where you can use it as much as you want. You just have a limit in terms of how often you use it per minute, which, essentially you just put a couple of sleeps in your code and it will just trundle through and smash through it all. So this was how I kind of initially got started, and then I switched to their facial recognition bit. Where's the example for that? There you go. So a very quick overview of how it works is you create a person group. Essentially, it's a dictionary. And you say, here are 10 pictures of Connor Fitzgerald. This is what they look like. And you have to give them a picture. It's an image just of that person. So I'm going to try and find, I have asked his permission before I do this. I'm about to leak something, I know it. Where's that picture gone? Essentially, in fact, Con, I'm going on your Facebook. There it is. So can anyone work out why this photo kept failing? So I kept trying to upload this to Azure, and I was like, no, this is one. It was one of my 10 pictures of Connor, and it just kept blowing up, and I hadn't written any error code, and it just drives me bonkers. And in the end, I realised it was because it was also finding Lionel Richie in the background, which was really frustrating. But essentially, that's how it works: is you give it 10 images of just that person, and it will build I think it's a neural network, essentially to be able to recognise that. So you build up that person, and then you train it. And so this is where, if you're using the free tier, you just tell it to wait a second. So I think I ran this for an hour in the background to upload. I think it was 20 photos of each person, and there were 5 people, including me in the thing. And essentially, you then can just call it and say, well, here's an image. Do you recognise it? And so that code is here. So I go and find all the faces from the image, and I get the IDs back for that. In fact, let's go into that one. Yeah, so here I upload the photo as an image stream. There's different detection and recognition models you can do. I won't go into those, but essentially they have different strengths and weaknesses, and I think behind the scenes they're different types of kind of the learning behind it. Essentially, I just sort of take all of that data that I get back from Azure, treat them as candidates, and then I check the person group, and so actually is this picture in this group, and then if it is, it will check a dictionary that I've built. So actually, that's Amy Conway, that's Sammy Beglin, that's Connor Fitzgerald, that's me. To do that, so because bits are broken at the moment, Con, is your camera on? Me and Connor have agreed we'll do a demo because unfortunately my wife isn't in, so she can't ring the doorbell. And I was going to do it that way, but Connor's on, so I've built a bit of test code.
It's on now.
Right, so let's get. Can I get you any bigger? Let me just stop sharing for a split second so I can get a bigger picture of Connor.
This feels very weird.
Yeah, it does. I really hope this works. So let's save. I've taken a print screen of what Connor's showing, and I'm going to put it on my box. So essentially, on both my laptop and the actual server, I have just a directory where I save all the snapshots to. One of the things I make sure is that I always overwrite it. So it means I'm never storing anyone's data. So I've only ever got the last picture that someone's done. So I don't have this big database of pictures of my friends, because that would be really creepy. So let's save it there. Did that work? No. Okay, so I think that's gone in. So now let's share my screen again. Cool. I think you can turn your camera off now, Connor. Thank you for that. I know how much you hated doing that for me.
You're welcome.
You'll see my screen again?
Yep.
So what I've done is I will add this to the example later. But essentially what I've done is I wrote a very quick bit of test code which uploads just a photo and runs it against my current face recognition stuff. So let's, there we go. So if I run this, it should have a go at recognizing. Oh, there you go. That came back quite quick. So this is essentially what I get back from Azure is it gives you a confidence metric. So it says actually it's 90% sure that that photo I took and uploaded and saved as testcon.png is Connor. It says, well, there's one person in that photo and that person, I think he's 90% sure it's Connor Fitzgerald. So that's essentially how it works under the hood to send me that I can then send that onto Facebook. So that really is kind of the whole end-to-end things. It's not a huge amount of code. It's not very complex, mostly because people at Microsoft and Dusty from GitHub have done all the hard work for me. All I've done is plug it in together, and that's essentially the story of the whole smart home. Is I've just taken stuff that other people have done and plugged it in and integrated it. And to be honest, it's a really good project for that. I've kept a print screen of this is what it should look like when it doesn't work. So this was what it kept saying. Every time there was movement outside, it kept firing off because my neighbours have got lots of cats that run across the garden, so I had to disable some things. So that's essentially the end-to-end project, and hopefully there's enough on the workshop for you to have a go. If you've got any questions, just tweet me, DM me. I've put all my links in at the end. If you do want to sort of do that. If you're going to report me, my name's Connor Fitzgerald. If you want to give me praise, it's Dan Beglin. In terms of the ethical issues, I think we kind of touched on a few halfway through. So kind of the things which, sort of really these just come from a discussion with me and Sammy, but I'm interested to see what other people think because you guys know far more about me on that. Everyone in the group has currently consented, all 5 people. But what if Connor says, I want you to get rid of it now? Obviously, being a friend, I would just delete it straight away. But that's still a bit. Do I have to prove that? The other thing is that whenever my postman comes to my door, he rings the doorbell if it's a thing. He has never, when I first built it, I did check with my actual postman, and he was fine with it. But I now have a new postman. I've not spoke to him yet. We're going to move house. I might not have a good relationship with my postman like I did before. But they're on my property. So it's do they have the right to privacy if they've come onto my land? The other kind of points that sort of Sammy and I sort of mulled over was that this, it kind of needs an excessive amount of personal data. It needs lots of photos, but all of the photos I took that were all publicly available because my friends don't know how to use security and protect, sort of privacy protections on their Facebook accounts. Have I really done anything? It was already public. All I did was kind of put it somewhere else. Is that wrong? And I'm interested in that. And then, as I mentioned, every image could include pictures of my neighbour's land. That is really problematic if I hadn't have checked with them. And that's kind of one of the big challenges if you're going to do this for yourself is, is that right to do? Is it okay to kind of constantly take photos of someone else's property? So yeah, we'll do a Q&A afterwards, in a sec where we'll mull over these. The last thing is I'm documenting the whole kind of smart home project. So I've got an Instagram and a Twitter, and I've been doing some Medium. I've got a couple more unpublished that are going out next week, kind of how I've done the smart home, kind of following the progress, the code of it. I've got a few other bits which if I just put my link tree in the chat.